currently looking at the oil and tempera painting, The Virgin and Child with Saint Anne. This work was painted by the Italian Renaissance great Leonardo da Vinci during the Cinquecento period.
This work is, in my opinion, an underrated masterpiece.
Agreed.
Look at the way that Da Vinci has combined the pyramidal structure and lighting technique.
It really speaks to how well-rounded Da Vinci was. He was, in every sense of the word, a Renaissance man. He was a mathematician, an anatomist, an inventor, and a talented artist, both using oil and tempera as his medium and in his pencil sketches in his famous journals.
Yes, Da Vinci really was revolutionary for his time, and you can see that in the way that Mary, the front female figure, is painted. Can you see the way that her neck stretches, how the action of her reaching for her child, Jesus, on the right, affects her posture and the rest of her body?
Da Vinci was known and even infamous for breaking into morgues at night and cutting open cadavers to study the musculature and all the other interior structures. These studies come across in his figures.
Da Vinci had this insatiable need to understand how everything works. He saw the body and its workings as a machine, and you can really see that in his sketches and studies.
Yes, another way that Da Vinci revolutionized the art world of the 16th century was by his mastery of sfumato.
He didn't actually invent this technique, but he was the artist to bring it into the public consciousness, and many say he was the first to truly master it.
Indeed, eventually it was actually known as Leonardo smoke. It's this style of changing the color of objects as they recede into the distance. They get more hazy, darker.
See, for example, the difference between the skin tone of Mary and Saint Anne, who is the female figure behind Mary, and is further back in space.
While her face is still detailed and quite realistic, its lines are less defined than Mary's, and the color is darker.
This sfumato effect can be perhaps more clearly seen in Leonardo da Vinci's most famous work, his portrait of Mona Lisa.
Da Vinci's sfumato really adds to the enigma that has made this piece so famous. It's truly remarkable. Look at the way the light seems to bounce off of her skin. This is the epitome of Renaissance naturalism. She looks so real, like she's sitting right in front of us.
We as a culture are so fascinated by this work, and yet I bet Da Vinci himself would not have anticipated such a response to this painting.
From her cryptic facial expressions to the vast and hazy landscape, the Mona Lisa is pervaded by mystery. Perhaps the mystique is why we flood into the Louvre to see the small painting, but Da Vinci's technique is not to be overlooked.
See the shading used to achieve the intricate wrinkles in the fabric on Mona Lisa's sleeves, and the slight differences in pigment that create the translucent veil on her head. Da Vinci had an amazing grasp on chiaroscuro.
And again, chiaroscuro is a technique that had existed long before Da Vinci began his work, but his artistic invention is in how he adapted it and combined it with other techniques such as the sfumato and the use of oil and tempera. This is what characterized the Renaissance as a whole, this adaptation and blending of new and old styles and techniques.
The next of the big three, Michelangelo, saw himself as more of a sculptor than a painter.
He utilized some of the same artistic innovations of the Renaissance that Da Vinci did, but his sculptural forms were also revolutionary in their own right.
Very true. Michelangelo believed in the ideas of Neoplatonism, and he saw his marble sculptures in this light. He would look at a solid block of marble and see in it the idea of the figure he was trying to make. Then he would just carve away everything that wasn't that idea.
It's really incredible. Here, Michelangelo has sculpted the young David, moments before his famous biblical battle against Goliath. He holds a slingshot and has a striking, determined look in his eye. We can also tell that Michelangelo has intentionally brought back the Greek and Roman posture of contrapposto.
Yes, and you can see it in that relaxed left leg that's resting out to the side. This posture affects the tilt of his hips and ultimately adds an aspect of life and vitality.
We can speculate that perhaps one of the reasons that David is in this extreme posture is that the piece was carved out of an imperfect, shallow piece of marble that had already been used and rejected by another artist.
And yet the piece still looks so natural and realistic. Michelangelo's skill as a sculptor is really incredible.
His sculpture-esque figures are also present in his paintings. We're looking at what is probably Michelangelo's most recognizable masterpiece, the Sistine Chapel.
There are so many separate scenes we could talk about. These frescoes tell the story of the book of Genesis through a series of separate, vibrant panels.
The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel reminds me in a way of Roman Fourth-style wall paintings, in that Michelangelo has found a way to fit in so many disparate techniques and scenes into one work. Sculptural figures, vibrant colors, even political statements. It's all there.
The most recognizable of these panels is the creation of Adam. On the left, we see Adam himself moments before God, the main figure on the right, gifts him with life. You can see the influence of Michelangelo's experience with sculpture on this form. Adam looks like a sculptor himself.
Yes, look at the intricacies of the muscles in his legs, torso, and arms. He's also smoother than we've seen before. He almost looks like he's carved out of marble.
And this is especially impressive considering that all of this is fresco.
The god figure's draped clothing is also reminiscent of drapery in Greek and Roman marble sculpture. It reminds me of the Greek work, Nike adjusting her sandal.
You look at the attention to detail in this panel, everything from strands of hair to intricate chiaroscuro outlining the figure's musculature. And you can't help but think this is incredible, and it's one of dozens of panels.
When you think of Da Vinci, works like the Mona Lisa or the Last Supper immediately come to mind. The same goes with Michelangelo and David, or the Sistine Chapel.
But there really isn't just one work that is associated with the last of the big three, Raphael.
And yet his artistic skill and legacy are undeniable. Raphael was a master of composition. His works are marked by distinctive harmony and grace. No artist before him was so skilled at unifying movement and space.
We can really see this in his Triumph of Galatea. Now look at how the figures overlap and interact with each other within the space. The painting really feels like it's living.
Look at the central figure, Galatea. Her body is twisted in a way that shows off Raphael's deep understanding of human anatomy. Her flowing hair and pulling of the dolphin's reins accentuates this torsion, an example of Raphael's masterful composition.
And notice the musculature of these figures. They have a real weight and are remarkably naturalistic. The activation of different muscles on each of the characters adds to the physicality of this piece.
Yes, we can really feel a push and pull throughout the painting. All of the figures are moving differently, and yet the movement is not overwhelming. The figures are graceful, bringing balance rather than disorder to the piece.
This grace and harmonious movement is clear in Raphael's most famous work, School of Athens.
This work is considered by many to be the quintessential Italian Renaissance work, and we can see why. It combines so many of the innovations we've discussed, from the bright colors to the anatomic correctness of the figures.
Raphael also makes use of linear perspective. See how the coffered arches and the patterned flooring create diagonal straight lines or orthogonals.
Yes, these orthogonals intersect at the vanishing point, right between the heads of Plato and Aristotle. The use of classic Greek architecture to create this illusion of space and perspective is characteristic of the Renaissance period.
There are so many figures and they all move beautifully and easily. There's no sense of congestion at all.
Raphael's depiction of movement is exceptional. He doesn't label the famous figures in the piece, but we're able to tell who is who through their movement. The gesture of each figure suggests their inner philosophies, and there's no repetition in the figure's movements.
Exactly. Let's look at the two central figures, Plato and Aristotle. Plato, who is fixated on the ethereal idea of forms, points upward, while Aristotle, who focuses more on the immediately observable world, stands with palm pointing down, as if he's telling us to stay grounded and take in the world directly around us.